CCTV America, we have an international staff, and one of our associate producers here in Washington is a native of Singapore, Audrey Siek. She joins me here in the studio. And Audrey, we've been talking about this, an emotional time for all Singaporeans. Although this was somewhat expected, he had been ill for some time, still a deep impact, whether you're young or old.
Absolutely, Elaine. My heart was beating out of my chest just watching the interview, and it's been beating out of my chest since the news broke. This is such a big deal for Singapore. I heard someone say that this is like almost a Nelson Mandela moment for Singaporeans, and that to me is such a great description of how so many Singaporeans are feeling, and myself included, is feeling right now. You know, going on social media, Facebook, Twitter, even it's so early in the morning, so many Singaporeans are weighing in, sharing their grief, you know, like showing their sorrow. He was such a beloved figure in Singapore, especially to the older generation, because those are the people who truly remember who he was, what he's done, and they remember a Singapore before its transformation. But to the younger generation as well, since Singapore history is such an important part of the Singaporean education, across the board, Singaporeans know what he's done for Singapore. And you know, you could love or hate the man, you could agree or disagree with his policies, but at the end of the day, there is a deep level of respect that Singaporeans have for him, and this is huge. This is a historical moment, a milestone even in Singaporean history for sure.
Let's bring in CCTV's Liling into our conversation. She joins us now from New York. Liling, you're also Singaporean. I know that this has hit you hard as well. Kind of bring your insights into this because, as Audrey mentioned, young or old, a lot of people feel the same way because many don't know a Singapore without Lee Kuan Yew.
Absolutely, and on the personal front, I've been getting updates from relatives, from my father in Singapore about Lee Kuan Yew's condition over the past few weeks, and he was the first person who notified me of the announcement of Lee Kuan Yew's passing just after 3:18 when we got that announcement from the Prime Minister's office, from the Prime Minister himself through that tweet. And this is really a lost effort by a nation who views Minister Mentor, the former Prime Minister, as a grandfather of the nation. And just to give you a sense of the responses that I've been seeing on Facebook and Twitter, a former classmate of mine in Singapore when I was at the Anglo-Chinese Junior College, Patrick Sam, in his Facebook post shares pictures of the Singapore General Hospital. He's there right now, and he was there to show support and to remember and share prayers over for the former Prime Minister and to share his condolences for the family. We also have poems written by a former classmate of mine, Mavis Liu, and let me quote, "Your frailty I cannot comprehend. All I know is your might. A sob catches in my throat each time I read about your plight." And this is really the sentiment, the outpouring of emotion that a lot of people talking about feeling tearful over the news of remembering the former Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew when he was robust and out and about. So this is really, even though he's been sick for a while, this is really a distressing time for so many Singaporeans, myself included.
All right, Liling in New York. And Audrey, you know, a lot of people around the world are finding out about Lee Kuan Yew. Maybe they didn't even know much about him. What would you think that Singaporeans want them to know about this man that they didn't already know? I mean, there are obviously some perceptions, but what would you want them to know?
You know, as the story unraveled the past couple of days, he's been sick, as you know, and people saw the outpour of grief and heartbreak, and people have outright just asked me, like, what's the big deal? Like, why is he such a big deal? And it's hard to explain because I was talking to my friends and family back in Singapore. We can't think of an American equivalent. We can't think of an equivalent of Lee Kuan Yew. But what I would say is that he was more than just a politician to many Singaporeans. You know, there's a reason why his nickname back home is Father Lee or Grandpa Lee. People feel like they've lost a member of their own family even. There's a reason why thousands of people have been lining up outside his hospital praying for him to get better. There's a reason why people have been sending him flowers with notes that read, you know, "You make me proud to be Singaporean." This is more than just the loss of a politician. No matter how controversial it is, it cannot be overshadowed. What can't be overshadowed is the contributions that he's made to Singapore. And this is just such a great loss. And I think a lot of Singaporeans are finding this really hard to process.
And I know you said personally you credit him with you knowing more than just one language.
Absolutely. He was very adamant, and he wanted to make sure that young Singaporeans were taught English in schools. I would never forget this. It was called the Good English Campaign back home in Singapore. And another thing that he made sure that he wanted everybody to know is that he wanted us to be able to speak a second language. So if you were ethnically Chinese like me, you had to learn 10 years of Mandarin. If you were ethnically Indian, you get to learn 10 years of Tamil, and that comes in very handy. I could safely say that if it weren't for that, I probably wouldn't be here right now.
All right, Audrey, Siek, stay with us. We'll continue to check in with you. Thank you so much for sharing your personal perspective on Lee Kuan Yew.